This project is sponsored by Pro Hardware. I'm a big fan of the Pro star drive screws, and I'll have a link to all the screws used in this project down below. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the shop. I just finished building this air cleaner storage cabinet. It's a great addition to the shop and really a good use of otherwise wasted space. The air cleaner that I'm using is older and it's no longer available, but the Jet 12x24 is just about the same size, and I'll have a link to that one in the description below. Let's go ahead and get to work. I'll get started with the bottom cabinet. I'm using 1/2-inch birch plywood for the bottom and top of this cabinet simply because that's what I had here in the shop. If you decide to use 3/4-inch plywood, the only change to the plans you'll need to make is to use smaller casters and make the drawer faces a 1/4 inch wider. For the sides of the cabinet and cabinet divider, I'm using 3/4-inch birch plywood. With the parts cut to size, I'll pre-drill and countersink evenly spaced holes for the screws. Now that I've drilled the holes on both the top and bottom, I'll flip the parts over and make a mark at 16 1/8 and then use a straight edge to draw a line. And I'll line the 3/4-inch cabinet divider on this line. I'm building the cabinet with wood glue and 1.5-inch screws. I'll get the parts in position and then tack them together with an 1.25-inch nail. That'll keep them from moving around, and then I'll come back with the 1.5-inch screws for a stronger joint. The cabinet divider is a 1/2 inch shorter than the cabinet sides. This will allow for the 1/2-inch plywood that I'm using for the cabinet back. When I attach the divider, I'll make sure it's set in a 1/2 inch at the back and flush at the front. Okay, well now that I've just about finished with the first box, I'll move on to the second box that will sit just left of the air filter. I'm building the smaller box by simply nailing it together with 1.25-inch nails. This cabinet is not supporting any weight, and the nails and glue joint will be more than enough to support the drawer. I'm ripping 3/4 by 3/4-inch plywood cleats that I'll attach to the inside back of the cabinet. I'll set the cleats in 1/2 inch and attach them with wood glue and nails, using 1.25-inch nails when I'm nailing into the sides of the cabinet and 1-inch nails when I'm nailing into the bottom and top. I'm using the shorter nails when I nail into the bottom and top, so I don't accidentally nail through the 1/2-inch plywood. When the project is almost finished, the 1/2-inch back will be screwed into these cleats and the center divider. Next, I'll cut the backs to size, make sure they fit, and pre-drill and countersink the holes to attach them to the cleats. The drawers will slide on wooden cleats, so the next step is to cut the cleats to size at 3/4 by 1 inch. Next, I'll cut the cleats to length and then use the drill press to pre-drill and countersink holes for the screws. I ripped a piece of scrap plywood at 9 1/4 inches, and I'll use it as a jig when I attach the cleats to the cabinet. Using a little wood glue and 1.5-inch nails, I'll tack the cleats in place and then use 1.5-inch screws for more strength. You'll notice that all of my screws are from Pro Hardware, and that's because I'm a big fan of the non-slip star drive head. I keep a variety of the Power Pro screws I use most on the tool wall above my miter saw. On one of the cleats that will be attached to the cabinet divider, I offset the holes so the screws don't meet. Okay, and that's about it for the cabinet. The next step is to get to work on the drawers. I'm building the drawers out of 3/4 inch birch plywood, and I'll get started by cutting the parts to size. Once I have the parts ripped to width, I'll square up one end of each board, then set up a stop block and cut the parts to length. To avoid confusing the parts, I hang the square end off of the table. This reminds me that this is the end that goes against the stop block. Now that I have the drawer sides, fronts and backs of the drawers cut to size, the next step is to cut a groove at the bottom of the drawers to accept the drawer bottoms. I've lowered the blade to 1/4 inch and set the fence at 3/8 of an inch. I'll make one pass on this piece of scrap wood and all of the drawer parts. After making one pass on all of the parts, I'll knock the fence over a bit and make another pass. I'm using Baltic birch plywood for the drawer bottoms, and it's a true 1/4 inch. So I'll need to knock the fence over a tiny bit more and test the fit on a scrap piece before making the last pass on all of the parts. With the last pass of the groove cut in all of the parts, I'll keep the fence in the same position, raise the blade, and cut through the drawer backs. This will allow me to slide the drawer bottom into place. If you're wondering if it was necessary to cut the groove in the drawer backs in the first place, it wasn't. It's just something that I've always done, and it kind of keeps me from getting confused with all of the parts. Since the groove is 1/4 inch deep, I'll take a measurement of the drawer front, add 7/16 of an inch, and cut the drawer bottoms to width. Next, I'll set up a stop block on the miter saw and cut the bottoms to length. Now that I have all the drawer parts cut to size, the next step is to assemble the drawers. I'm setting the back of the drawer in 2.5 inches, and that will prevent the drawer from falling out of the cabinet. I've cut a piece of scrap wood at 2.5 inches, and I'll trace a line on both drawer sides, making sure that I'm flush with the back. Next, I'll spin these parts around, flip them over, and measure in 3/8 of an inch. Use that same 2.5 inch spacer, and now I'm marking a line to pre-drill and countersink holes for the screws. Measuring down from the top, I'll make a mark at 1.5 and 7. I'll do the same thing on this drawer side. And I'll flip the drawers around, measure in 3/8 of an inch, which is half the thickness of 3/4 of an inch. Draw a line. And again, making a mark at 1.5 inches and 7. I'm using a little wood glue, and I'll hold the parts so they are flush at the top, and in the front, and tack the parts together with an 1.5 inch nail. With the parts tacked in position and everything's nice and flush, I'll use an 1.5 inch screw for the stronger joint. When I attach the back of the drawer, I'll use 2 5/8 pieces of plywood as shims to raise the plywood flush with the drawer sides. Again, I'm going to add a little wood glue, tack the parts in place, and then use the 1.5 inch screw for the stronger joint. I'm using a clamp to hold the parts in position, and I've set the back in 2.5 inches. It's at that line, and now I can go ahead and tack it in place. With the drawer built, I'll add a bead of glue in the groove at the front of the drawer and drop the bottom in place. Next, I'll make sure the drawer is square and then tack the bottom to the back with a few 1-inch nails. Then I'll use a few 1.25 inch screws for more strength. These are the Power Pro 1 multi-material screws, and I really like the way they look, and I like the holding power that you get from the wafer head. Next, I'll add a bead of hot glue at the bottom of the drawer, and this will add a little more strength and remove any rattle that may be there if you don't have a super tight fit. I cut the 3/4 inch birch plywood drawer fronts to size off camera, and now I'm adding the iron-on edge banding. With everything sanded, the next step is to finish the project. For this cabinet, I'm using Total Boat's Halcyon Clear Varnish. This is a water-based finish, and I'll apply 3 coats. I've allowed the finish to dry, and now I can assemble the cabinet. I made a quick jig for drilling holes in the front of the drawers to attach the drawer fronts. When I attach the bottom drawer fronts, I'll attach them flush with the bottom of the cabinet. When I attach the top drawer fronts, I'll attach them flush with the top of the cabinet. I made another simple jig to attach the drawer pulls in the center of the drawer fronts. Using this wooden block will make it easier to drill straight holes. Next, I'll attach the casters and then the top cabinet. Because the air filter has a few sheet metal screws in the bottom of it, I added 1/8 inch shims at the front and back of the cabinet. With the air cleaner on the cabinet, I'll put the drawers in, adjust the position of the cleaner, and secure it with a few screws. I needed to move the miter gauge, so I made this simple bracket for the side of the cabinet. Okay, well, I definitely think that this is a nice addition to the shop. I used to have this air cleaner up on the ceiling. I didn't really like the way it looked. It was kind of an obstruction of view. Also, I didn't maintain it as much, and my thought here is with it in view like this, I'm going to be inspired to keep it clean. A few notes: I did have to cut the bracket that attaches the leg to this side table here. Really simple. I just used the cutting wheel and the grinder. I had to cut the front one and the back one, and then the cabinet fit right in. But when I first went to go put the cabinet in, the back of the cabinet hit those brackets. So that was one of those like, whoa, what's going on here? But anyway, simple fix. Also, I used 3-inch casters. If you're going to use 3/4 inch plywood, which I would probably suggest, just use 2 or 2.5 inch casters. I did add a 5th caster to the center of the cabinet, and I mounted it diagonally so the wheel would be in direct support with the cabinet divider. And I did hook the air cleaner up to a remote control switch, which is plugged into a gang box underneath the table. And it's really convenient. I'm keeping both of these right here on my fence there. So I think it's just, I think it's nice. I'm excited with the shop, and I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And as always, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Don't forget to click on the link in the description below and check out the plans for this project. And for the next 48 hours, you can pick up the 8 plans bundle. These beginner to intermediate woodworking projects will get you inspired to get out in the shop and make some sawdust.